Well, hey, hi there. Welcome to Crime Dive. My name is Crystal Sky, and if you're anything like me, you find yourself drawn to true crime cases. So that's what I talk about. If you like true crime and you want to feel better about your makeup skills, you should absolutely like, subscribe, and come hang out with me every Tuesday where I take a deep dive look into a true crime case while slapping on my war paint. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Yes, I know it's in a couple days, but again, I won't see you until after it's over. So, want to take this time to say Happy St. Patrick's Day. I never really do much to celebrate, but in case you are one of those types that, go out, it should need to be said, given it's 2022. But remember, don't drink and drive and all that. Be smart, and have a happy and safe St. Patrick's Day. Also, next week will be my last video for the month of March. I will explain more at the end of this video. And real quick, before we get into part 2 of our Candy Montgomery case, I'm going to try my best to mitigate this background audio in post the best I can. Y'all ever have those neighbors that have to party every Friday and Saturday night and they can't just have a relaxed get together, They got to have a raging party. So sorry if you hear some in the background. I'm going to try to mitigate it the best I can, but we work with what we got here, right? Okay, well, let's go ahead and get into today's case. If you remember, today is part 2 of our Candy Montgomery case. Candy Montgomery, the axe murderer. And real quick, remember last week in part 1, so we talked about the murder of Betty Gore, the gruesome, terrible, awful murder and death that she suffered. And then we went into who Betty was. We went to her husband, Alan, and then we were introduced into their friends, the Montgomerys, Candy and Pat. And then we talked about the affair Alan and Candy had. And then last we left off, their affair was over. It was over and done with. And yeah, let's go ahead and continue on with today's case. And then, quick disclaimer, again, I won't go into too gruesome of a detail, but we're still dealing with adult content here. We're talking about affairs, and the death of Betty will be brought up again, not in as much detail, but it still would be talked about. Okay, let's continue. So Candy and Pat, Candy and Alan, they broke up, right? They are no longer having an affair. Now, Candy, she's kind of bummed about this, but within a matter of weeks, she has another affair because remember, Candy is feeling empty and restless. And so she thinks she's just going to find something by, diving into men. So this next affair she has is with a man named Richard. She met him at a neighbor's Halloween party, and he was a traveling salesman, and he was married with 3 kids. Now, in the several weeks that they were together, this was definitely more of the affair that Candy was looking for, all right? Remember, she was looking for Fabio. She was looking for someone to sweep her off her feet. And Richard was a little more akin to that, all right? So they would spend lots of time together. Richard could set his own schedule, so they could spend upwards of 4 hours together. And then they did more than, just have sex. They, went shopping, had lunch, all that kind of thing. And then, as far as the sex was concerned, whereas Alan had been, timid and inexperienced, Richard was experimental and aggressive, which, as we know, that's what Candy's looking for. And so she's really enjoying this, right? But as with most things in life, right, not everything good can last. And Richard starts becoming a little too attached, starts becoming a little too obsessive with Candy. He starts calling her at her house in the daytime and just taking too big of risks, talking about marrying her and leaving their spouses. This is just too much for Candy. It's too much, And so she breaks it off with Richard, which he did not take kindly to, by the way. He did not take kindly to this, and it was a pretty messy breakup. Now, eventually, Candy realized that if she was going to quell this sadness, this like emptiness, restlessness within her, she was going to have to work on herself, all right? She was going to have to work on herself and not dive into men and affairs, you know? So, to that end, she started doing things for herself, you know, started getting involved in projects and stuff for herself. She enrolled in advanced creative writing class. I remember we talked about her taking these classes before, and her teacher said she had talent, and so she enrolled in a more advanced one and was diving into that. Her and her friend were going to start their own wallpapering and like painting company, and so yeah, she was deciding, you know what, I gotta find something that, you know, focuses on me, that I can put my energy towards and, you know, work on myself. Candy and Pat would also end up attending Marriage Encounter. So Candy saw how it had seemed to work wonders for the Gores. And remember, she's kind of lacking in her marriage right now. You know, we talked about how she kind of felt like Pat didn't really take an interest in like her hobbies or interests or what was important to her. And so, yeah, they decided to give it a go. And like the Gores, Marriage Encounter seemed to work wonders for them. Even after Pat discovered the affair with Alan, it is around this time that Pat discovers the affair, and he's crushed, all right? He's absolutely heartbroken and crushed, but he blames himself mostly for the affair. Like, he just is like, you know, obviously I wasn't paying attention, you know, obviously I wasn't giving the attention I needed to my wife, and then he also kind of felt a little foolish and realized just how not present he had been, because like Alan and Candy had carried on the affair right in front of everyone, you know, like they would even openly flirt with each other at the church, but you know, Pat not, you know, really here with everyone present, just didn't really see it, you know? And it is here that he decides that he was going to rededicate himself to his marriage. And yeah, it seemed that Marriage Encounter was just what the Montgomerys needed, and they also really benefited from it. Now, it seemed by the summer of 1980, both the Gores and the Montgomerys were each happy in their respective marriages, the happiest that they had ever been. So great, right? Happy ending, end of story. No. So let's go back to the day of Betty Gore's murder. Friday the 13th, June 13th, 1980. So Candy's schedule is jam-packed that day, all right? Jam-packed. So there was like this vacation Bible school thing that had been going on all week, and Candy was supposed to help like prepare for like, this is the last day, so it was like the graduation day. And so there was a lot to prepare for, you know. She had to help create like a puppet show, she had to help prepare snacks and stuff, and then they were also gonna prepare a luncheon as like a thank you for all of the women who had volunteered to teach all that week. On top of that, Candy had a whole list of errands to run, and you know, just random errands, putting gas in the car. She had to run by Walmart to pick up some Father's Day cards. She had to run somewhere else and drop something off to a friend, and she had like 3 or 4 other stuff that she had to do. And because of like where she was located, you know, like the stuff was, you know, it was kind of inconveniently, you know, spaced away, you know, so she had a jam-packed schedule. And so that morning she's eating breakfast with her kids and Alyssa Gore, because Alyssa had stayed the night. And Alyssa and Jenny are begging Candy to let Alyssa stay another night. They really, really wanted her to stay another night. And Candy, you know, she's distracted trying to think of everything she had to do that day. And so she finally relented and was just like, yes, totally fine. Now, the reason Jenny wanted Alyssa to stay over another night was because that night the Montgomerys were going to go to Dallas and see The Empire Strikes Back. And Jenny really wanted Alyssa to come with them. Now, it was unusual to have the kids stay over 2 nights in a row. That was sort of like the rule, I guess, the Montgomerys and Gores had established. But again, Candy was just busy and was just like, yeah, that's fine. But since Alyssa was going to stay the night again, that meant she was going to have to drive by Betty and Alan's house to pick up Alyssa's swimsuit and take her to her swim lesson that afternoon. So yeah, another thing to add add to the list, right? So she left the house in a burgundy blouse and some jeans and her trademark open-toed sandals that Candy always wore in the summer. And she also left with Jenny, Ian, and Alyssa in tow. And so first they went to the church where Candy dropped off the kids and Alyssa. And then she attended to some tasks there. And then she told her friends there, like, hey, I have to leave and go attend to some errands. I will be back later. And so she leaves the church, almost around 10 a.m.-ish, around there. The first place Candy had to go to was Betty's house, and so that's where she went. Now, the next thing Candy knew, she was in her car driving, and her left toe was hurting really badly. She must have just cut it on the storm door. That's what she was saying to herself. I must have just cut it on the storm door. I've been after Pat to fix that storm door, and I must have cut it on there. Not only that, but her jeans were soaking wet, and they smelled overwhelmingly of, bleach and laundry detergent. She was really unfocused, and she was struggling, of what she was doing that day, of what she had to do that day. She drove all the way home, bandaged her toe, changed her blood-soaked blouse, took a shower, discovered she had an open cut on the right side of her head, and she tried to bandage it, but she couldn't, so she just tried to hide it her best with makeup and hair. She got a new blouse, new jeans, and put on some tennis shoes so she could protect her injured toe. She then left for the church, where she was long overdue. Candy had been gone for quite some time. She had missed the puppet show, and her kids were asking, hey, have you seen my mom? So Candy pulls up to the church, meets her friend Barbara Green outside, and they proceed inside where the luncheon was in full swing. And Candy gets some lasagna and, attends to the luncheon, acting like everything's normal. Although her friends did notice that Candy wasn't as talkative and open as she usually was. And stranger still, she was wearing tennis shoes, which was just really weird because everyone knew that Candy Montgomery wore sandals in the summer. Candy then proceeded to leave the church with Jenny, Ian, and Alyssa Gore, and they went to Walmart where they picked out some Father's Day cards, and Candy even let the kids get some candy for the movie later that night. And then she took all the kids home with her. She then called Pat to let him know that Alyssa was going to be going with them, so to take out enough money. She then told Alyssa to get ready for her swim lesson that afternoon. She took her, and then that evening, Candy, Pat, Ian, Jenny, and Alyssa Gore all head to Dallas to go see The Empire Strikes Back. And when they get home that evening, that is the first time that Alan Gore calls, and we know how the rest of that story goes. So let's flash forward to, right after Betty's death. At Betty's memorial service, which Candy attended, she actually spent time with her parents. She told them, quote, I just wish there was something I could do for you. She had even spent time with Alan in the home alone, and had even went into the utility room to put some food away in a freezer. Now, of course, the scene had been cleaned up, but still, she had, gone into the utility room where, Betty Gore had just been laying not too long before. So the investigation into Betty Gore's death would last about 2 weeks. Now, police quickly ruled out this theory of a, psychotic killer on the loose. They, I don't think they found, any signs of forced entry, and so they theorized that Betty Gore had known who attacked and killed her and had let them in. But there were some potential leads that kind of added to this, psychotic killer theory at first. There was a man in a mental health facility who called the Gores several times after Betty's death, admitting to it and threatening baby Bethany. But he had been locked up at the time of the murder, so he was just deeply disturbed. There was another man at a local bar who a waitress had overheard saying that he had to get out of town because they had, quote, found that woman. But again, remember what Dr. Stone said? The footprints were much too small to be that of a man, and of course this guy's footprints didn't match. Alan himself was, of course, a primary suspect. Of course, he's the husband, right? And the police, checked his alibi twice, but it was rock solid. He was in Minnesota. Now, since Candy had sort of inadvertently implicated herself in the crime by being the last person to see Betty Gore alive, the police, of course, interviewed her. And they interviewed her the first time for about an hour and a half. Candy told them that she got to Betty's house that morning at around 10 a.m. And when she got there, Betty had been sewing something out of yellow material and drinking some coffee, which of course she stopped when Candy came by. And, the two chatted for a while. Candy asked about Alyssa. And then they stepped outside because Candy wanted to see the Gore's new Cocker Spaniel puppy. And the two ladies talked some more. Candy excused herself for a moment to pick her hair because she had a perm, because this was 1980. I don't know why anyone wants a perm. I've never liked a perm. But Candy had a perm, and so she excused herself for a minute to, go pick it so it wouldn't get all frizzy. When she got back, the two women talked some more. Candy left Betty her business card for that wallpapering and painting service company that she was going to start with her friend. Betty then reminded Candy that if she was going to take Alyssa to her swim lesson, she was going to need to grab some peppermints. Apparently, Alyssa struggled with putting her head underwater, and when she did, she was rewarded with a peppermint. So Candy got that from Betty, and then as Betty went in the hall to get a towel, Candy went into the utility room to grab Alyssa's swimsuit. And then the two chatted some more, they said goodbye, and then Candy left, and she told the police the whole encounter took only 15 minutes. Now, during this interview, investigators never once asked Candy why her pinky nail on her left hand was torn. Investigators would soon circle in on Candy, though, mainly due to her being the fact that she was the last one to see Betty Gore alive. Now, they had questioned Alan, and again, trying to work the theory that possibly he had something to do with this, they were asking him, hey, have you ever had an affair? To which he denied it. He denied having an affair. But then later that day, after he had been released, he called the cops back and was like, you know what? I did have an affair, and it was with Candy Montgomery. But he told them that the affair was over, and I believe at this time the affair had been over, I think approximately 6 or 7-ish months, somewhere around there. After learning about this, investigators then theorized that it was either Candy and or Alan who had killed Betty. It was either one or both of them. They then brought Candy in for questioning again, and this time they were not so friendly. They pretty much made it clear that they were suspecting her and investigating her, and they really scared her, They were definitely playing the bad cop card, And this scare actually caused her and Pat to go lawyer up, and their lawyer would actually end up being the primary benefactor of the church that they attended, and he would also be a personal injury lawyer. They did not get a criminal defense attorney. They got a man by the name of Don Crowder. Now, he worked in a law office. The law offices were actually owned by, some guy who had gone on to become, a congressman and whatnot. And so it was Don Crowder in the office, and he took the personal injury cases. And then he also worked with a younger man. He was the criminal defense attorney, and his name was Rob Udeshin. That's what the news reports said his name was, because I was kind of confused on how to pronounce his name. So all the news reports I saw said Rob Udeshin was his name. And yeah, in the office, Udeshin would handle the criminal cases while, Crowder obviously handled the personal injury. And so yeah, he agreed to take Candy's case, and Don Crowder didn't think that anything was really gonna happen. They just thought the cops were sort of grasping at straws, Now, the police, they gave Alan Gore a polygraph, which he then passed. And it was after Alan Gore passed that their attention turned to Candy. And approximately 2 weeks after Betty Gore's death, Candy Montgomery was charged with her murder. Now, Candy's bail was set at $100,000, which meant that the Montgomerys were going to have to come up with $10,000 if they were going to keep Candy out of jail. Now, the bail bondsman that they were trying to get, he ended up holding up the entire process, because for the bond, not only did he want a promissory note from the Montgomerys for $90,000, he also wanted the deed to their house, which apparently wouldn't have even been useful to him, because apparently in Texas state law, I don't know if it's still the current law, but back in 1980, this was the law, where a homestead could not be seized or garnished or anything even in the form of bankruptcy. So, not sure why the bail bondsman, was, intent on getting their deed. But yeah, he held the whole process up. However, they finally did get the bond, so great, they can keep Candy out of jail. Not so fast. So, Candy, she knew that the warrant was out for her arrest, and so she had actually went to the police station. Uddason had actually driven her to the police station, and they thought it was just gonna be a quick arraignment, First, the bail bondsman held stuff up, so that was annoying. Then, as soon as they had that wrapped up and had the bond, all of a sudden, the police were telling Uddason that, oh yeah, you know what, the bond you got, it's actually not good. The sheriff isn't going to take it. And he was like, what? Why? Oh, well, the bond was issued in Dallas County and we're in Collin County. Yeah. So this whole ordeal was definitely going to take some time. So this whole process caused Candy's quick arraignment to take some time. And so she had to wait for it to play out in a cell. She was placed in handcuffs and, had to wait in a jail cell. Important to note that the police station at this time is swarmed with media. Candy had driven to the police station, to turn herself in. And, they thought this was going to be a quick thing. And the police had actually leaked that Candy was gonna come turn herself in because, remember, this case was all anyone was talking about, all right? All anyone was talking about. And when Candy was named as a suspect, of course, the reporters were flooding the police station because everyone wanted to get a picture of the woman who was accused of killing her ex-lover's wife. And, it was a big sensation, So, Candy has to wait in a cell. So she's placed in handcuffs. She's fingerprinted and her mugshot was taken, the whole 9 yards. And she was even strip searched. Where those injuries, remember the ones that Pat noticed himself? They were still apparent, and the female guards searching her made note of it, and they documented it. The police then took Candy to a hospital where she was going to be examined by a medical doctor. And you guessed it, the media and reporters were all over the hospital as well, because the police were leaking information as to where they were taking Candy, what they were doing, minute by minute updates almost. And so, they were trying to get pictures of her there, and a medical doctor examined her. Now, like I said, there was a lot of media attention around this case. It was all anyone could talk about. And as you can guess, as more information was coming out, and, it was first it was Alan Gore's female friend is questioned, and then it was, Alan Gore's ex-lover is questioned, and then it was now she's, charged with Betty's murder. And so, it was all anyone could talk about it. And boy, as you can guess, the media did not like Candy at all. They portrayed her as this ice-cold Scarlet woman, this home-wrecking two-faced PTA mom, and unfortunately, Candy, she didn't really help that narrative. So the photos that the press were taking, when she showed up at the police station, when she was taken to the hospital, remember? So, of course, a bunch of photos were snapped of her during all this, right? And when you look at these photos, she looks like she's smirking and smiling, like she's enjoying it. And that's certainly how the media portrayed it. Now, Candy has said that she wasn't, that wasn't her intent at all. That's not what she was displaying. She was trying to display strength. She didn't want the authorities, the police, even the media. She didn't want them to know that they had really rattled her, okay? Because she was scared. She was really scared. And so she wanted to put on, this brave front. And so, even if that was her intention, I don't know. You can see that I've showed a couple of them here already. They certainly don't look like that. Knowing that's what she was trying to convey, I guess you could see that, right? Where she's trying to I'm not going to let you break me, but it is really easy to kind of paint them as her smirking and enjoying the attention she's getting, and of course that's how the media portrayed it. These photos, they were so damaging. They even ruffled Crowder's feathers. Like, he saw those and he was like, oh my God, this isn't good. And he immediately called Candy up and was like, no, we gotta do damage control. You pretty much need to change your whole appearance, all right? First things first, you need to change your whole appearance. He really wanted her to play up, like, the fact that she's like a church-going mom. So he really wanted to, like, focus on that angle. So he told Candy to, get rid of the perm, grow out your hair like longer and wispier, you need to like dress more modestly. You need to lose a little bit of weight because he said that her arms were a little chubby. And the reason he wanted her to lose a little bit of weight is because he didn't want Candy's body to in any way, shape, or form reflect the body frame of Betty Gore, who was still a little bit heavier because she was still losing the baby weight from having Bethany. And yeah, he also told Candy to stop smoking, and he actually told her, like, from this point forward, her legal team was going to be making all of her decisions and to consult with them before she did anything. That's how bad the optics were in the press. And as we know, right, the court of public opinion is definitely going to have an impact on this case, especially in a small community where everyone knows everyone, right? But, yeah, despite being demonized in the press and it coming out about the affair and whatnot, Candy did still have her supporters. She still had her friends and those in her local church community who still maintained her innocence and stuck by her. Now, Crowder, he wanted to use this support to attack investigators and their evidence against Candy in the media. Because, again, he wanted to combat all these leaks. Like, the police had been leaking stuff all throughout this case. Remember I told you, the press and the reporters were at the police station and the hospital. There had even been reporters that showed up at Candy's door before she had even been officially arrested. And so Crowder really wanted to, like, attack this and attack him in the media. But Udasin was more, he just wanted to play nice, he didn't want to, like, tick them off, and he just didn't think that was a very good strategy. Crowder and Udasin, my lord, I'm sure that's going to happen more than once. They told Candy to just stay out of public altogether. Candy couldn't even attend church because, you guessed it, it was swarmed with media. Now, throughout all of this, Candy became kind of, detached, She had decided that she was going to leave things in the hands of, her lawyers, Crowder and her lawyers, and in the hands of God. Now, even from the outside, it may have seemed that Candy came off as, like, kind of, like, detached or unemotional, but she said she felt like an inner peace and an inner calm, Pat, though. Poor Pat, he was feeling anything but, all right? He was not having a great time. He was anxious. He didn't know what was going on. So at first, he, of course, didn't think that there was no way that Candy could have anything to do with Betty Gore's death. Like, there's no way. But as, like, the days go on, and Candy refuses to open up to Pat because even Crowder had said, like, you can't even talk to Pat, This kind of left Pat sort of, flailing in the wind, and so he starts thinking, like, she couldn't have had anything to do with Betty's death, right? And so he starts mulling things over. And you know how things kind of bring on a different light when you kind of look at them in retrospect, in hindsight? Well, that's what he was doing with those injuries that he noticed. Another thing that was really weird is all of a sudden, Candy's trademark sandals were gone. Yeah, and when he asked Candy, like, hey, where'd they go? She was just like, oh, I threw them away. Which, again, was really weird because she loved her sandals. Now, even though Pat did have his suspicions, and, like, if Candy had done it, he wouldn't want his wife to get away with murder. Pat said that he still, quote, wouldn't give up on her. So he was ride or die, all right? He was ride or die for Candy. Now, since there were suspicions and circumstantial evidence against Candy, Collin County District Attorney Tom O'Connell's problem was that wasn't so much the circumstantial evidence itself. You could win cases based on that. His problem was that he felt the police did not collect enough forensic evidence in time. So this one fingerprint that they had photographed, by the way, was not nearly enough to get a murder conviction that he knew. He was incensed that Candy had been interviewed twice before luring up, yet her injuries had not been noticed or documented or photographed, and he thought it was actually a miracle that her injuries were actually still there when she was strip searched, you know? No blood or hair samples had been taken from her. Neither her home nor her car was searched. They were searched, of course, after she'd been arrested, and they searched the car. However, Pat had washed the car the weekend previous, although investigators did find a microscopic spots of blood on the parking brake and on one of the pedals, but that's all they could find. So as O'Connell and his team are kind of going through, everything the investigators have brought them, and, they're strategizing, they're of course thinking, so what are Candy and her lawyers, what are they going to argue, and they're trying to figure out, what are they going to use as a defense? Now, O'Connell and his team, they immediately dismissed the self-defense route. They were like, there's just no way. First of all, Candy had lied to the police. She didn't come forward. So if someone was acting in self-defense, they don't need to do that. Not just that, the overkill that was done with Betty, all right? That was way overkill. Someone doesn't need to do that if they're, attacking in self-defense. Now, for the next several days, the prosecution and the defense would go toe-to-toe in the courtroom. O'Connell was trying to get a grand jury indictment on Candy for murder, while, of course, Crowder and his team were trying to prevent that. O'Connell and the prosecution, they accused Crowder and the defense team of actually hiding evidence. Oh no, I got something on my brush. Hold on. Okay, sorry about that. I think my brush landed in some eyeshadow or something. Anyway, so yeah, O'Connell and the prosecution, his team, they were accusing Crowder and his team of hiding evidence. They were specifically accusing them of hiding the clothes that Candy was wearing the day of the murder. And, of course, Crowder denied this, but guess what? The prosecution was right. Crowder and his team did have Candy's clothes. So Candy had given the clothes to Crowder, who had then put them in a sealed paper bag, and it was signed by a couple witnesses. And then Crowder and his team each played a game of hot potato while all these proceedings were going on, before finally Crowder gave the sealed up clothes to Pat, and he told Pat to keep them in a closet on a shelf, which he did. And not only was the defense and the prosecution going at it in the courtroom, they were also going at it in the press. Yeah, and both sides were just acting like absolute children. So the investigators, I should say, they were leaking what they had to the press. And like I said, they had been leaking details to the press. Crowder, of course, was attacking them in the press, even though Udasin didn't really want him to. Accusing them of planting evidence, of being hit cops who didn't know what they were doing. And Crowder was actually starting to sort of believe his own stuff. He started becoming paranoid, thinking that he was being followed and that his phones were being tapped. He was almost taking this case almost too close to heart, He even thought that the blood they had found in Candy's car was fake. It had been planted there, and they didn't really find anything. It was nonsense. And frankly, when you read some of these news articles and these quotes from both sides, they both come off like children, frankly. I'm sorry, they both do, honestly. Finally, District Court Judge Tom Ryan. He did not yet have any jurisdiction because there was not yet a grand jury indictment against Candy, but he did offer a public rebuke of both sides, of both the prosecution and the defense. And he basically said that when and if this case came before him and his court, this kind of nonsense going on in the press wasn't going to happen. And then finally, on July 9th, 1980, a grand jury did return a murder indictment on Candy, and she was to go to trial. Now, if you thought the case finally being in front of Judge Ryan would stop the leaks and stop the dramas, you would be wrong. So the day after the indictment returned, so July 10th, The Morning News, the local paper, had a bombshell story that landed, and it blew everyone's minds away, everyone. In the article, they claimed that Candy had taken a polygraph test and had failed, and it proved that she killed Betty Gore. So, the article said that Candy had taken this polygraph with her lawyers, and when she took the polygraph and it found that she was lying, allegedly, the man administering the polygraph, a man by the name of Don McElroy, stopped the test, told Candy that he thought she was lying. And that's when Betty broke down and confessed to the murder, all right? That's what this article said. Crowder was then reported in this article to have called Udasin and said what Candy had confessed to. And yeah, this article took everyone by surprise. Candy and Pat, of course, Crowder and Udasin, O'Connell, Judge Ryan, McElroy, the guy who allegedly administered the polygraph. Like, it took everyone by surprise. And finally, this article is what convinced Crowder that, yeah, all right, we need to go to court and we need to get like a gag order for the duration of this trial. O'Connell and the prosecution also agreed, and so they showed up to court in front of Judge Ryan to get this gag order, which was, granted no problem. But then, after the gag order was granted, then something else happened. Suddenly, there was a problem with Candy's bond. Yeah. Uh-oh. So O'Connell brought a witness. It was Sheriff Jerry Burton. And Sheriff Burton testified that the bond issuer who had issued Candy's bond, it was a lawyer by the name of Bob Hendricks. He was overextended, and so her bond was, not good anymore. What it came down to was Candy was going to have to fork over $15,000 if she wanted to stay out of jail. They were trying to rearrest Candy right then and there, and of course, this takes Udasin completely by surprise. So Udasin had been the only one showing up in court thus far. Crowder and Judge Ryan kind of had a history, and so Crowder thought it was best for him to not show up at court in person. So, it was Udasin there, and he was, of course, taken by surprise, because this was a sandbag. He had no idea what are you talking about? It seemed the judge, O'Connell, and the sheriff had all coordinated to do this, sandbag attack on Candy. And since there was now a gag order, Crowder couldn't go to the press and tell them what had happened. Yeah, double whammy. Candy was rearrested right then and there, and she would end up spending about a week in jail as Udasin and Crowder tried to sort this whole thing out. Now, Crowder and his team filed several petitions to try to fix Candy's original bond. They filed motions to try to lower her bail altogether. And before the bail reduction hearing could be held, Crowder also filed a federal lawsuit, and he was suing pretty much like every law enforcement official in Collin County, including Judge Ryan himself. Yeah. In this lawsuit, Crowder was claiming that they had violated Candy's civil rights and they were keeping her locked up. He accused them of holding a sandbag hearing. He also accused them of strip searching her illegally and making her be examined by a doctor against her will. And he also accused them of leaking unfavorable facts to the media. And again, this was his way to alert the press of what was going on. Since it was a federal lawsuit, it was of public record, and so these were all the grievances he was listing. So that's how he got around the gag order. So the bail reduction hearing was granted. It would end up lasting about 3 hours, and this was the first time that Crowder decided to show up in court in person. And of course, since Crowder and Judge Ryan had a history, they of course butted heads in court openly. And honestly, when you read about this hearing, it really does read like a whole Law and Order episode. It's just so funny, all the dramas. Crowder had Sheriff Burton on the stand, and he accused Sheriff Burton and the judge and O'Connell of all conspiring to keep Candy locked up illegally. And through his great cross-examination skills, Crowder got Sheriff Burton to admit on stand that this was the first time that one of Bob Hendricks's bonds was in question. He had never had problems before. And to everyone's surprise, Judge Ryan actually ruled in Candy's favor. He ruled that her bond was good after all. And she was then released from jail. Now, this was all before the actual trial, remember? Like, that was all drama that happened before the actual trial. The actual trial itself was, of course, a media sensation. There was so much attention around it that the new courthouse that had been built wasn't going to be able to hold the amount of people that were expected to attend. And so, the old courthouse in historic downtown McKinney was instead used as the venue for Candy's trial. It was an old, un-air-conditioned courthouse that housed about 250 people. And yeah, every day was a fight to try to get a seat. I watched lots of news reports from this trial from back in the day. And yeah, people were like, yeah, they were getting salty with each other. Like, they really wanted to view this trial. Now, Candy appeared at the first day of the trial. It was jury selection, and she showed up at the trial, and she had completely changed her appearance. She had taken Crowder's advice and, had changed up her appearance. So she wore, like, a blue, loose-fitting dress that went well past her knees with a little, like, white knit sweater around her shoulders. Her hair was no longer permed. It was just kind of, like, short and wispy. And then she also had on, like, these large glasses. She was really playing up the, like, matronly, like, motherly role, which is what Crowder told her to do. Now, Candy would dress like this for the whole duration of the trial. Now, Candy and her team had put in a plea of not guilty, and their strategy would take everyone by surprise, all right? So it was near the end of the day, all right? They were questioning their last round of juror candidates. And it is when they're questioning this last batch of, like, juror candidates that Crowder lays out what the defense's strategy is going to be. He said their strategy was going to be that Candy, she did kill Betty Gore. I know, right? What? She did kill Betty Gore, but it was in self-defense. I know, self-defense. What? Yeah, not just that. Crowder also told these juror candidates in the courtroom that Candy herself was going to take the stand and testify as to what happened on that Friday the 13th. I know. Drums! There was so much jaw-dropping when Crowder laid that out. Everyone was surprised, you know. O'Connell, the judge, the spectators. It was a bombshell. Now, to bolster their self-defense claim, Crowder and Udasin had actually had Candy put under hypnosis. A Houston psychiatrist and clinical hypnotist called, his name was Dr. Fred Faison. Now, Crowder had initially approached Dr. Faison to, laid out the situation. And at first, Dr. Faison wasn't really interested. He was like, nah. But as he learned more about the case, he was like, okay, I will meet with your client one time for a diagnosis, and then we'll see from there. And so I was like, yeah. And after one meeting, Dr. Faison agreed to be counsel for the defense. He thought Candy was telling the truth. What? So, of course, in preparation for the trial, months before the trial, Candy is then put under hypnosis by Dr. Faison. And she's put under hypnosis three different times, 3 different sessions. Each time she's in the session, under hypnosis, she would relay the events of that Friday the 13th. And then after she had her meeting with Dr. Faison and had given her recollection of events, Candy would then have a separate private meeting with both Crowder and Udasin, And then she would again give her version of events of what happened that Friday. But this time she wasn't under hypnosis. So she had her unconscious telling of the story when she was under hypnosis and her conscious telling of the events when she wasn't under hypnosis. And it is said that every time when her conscious recollection would conflict with her unconscious one, it is said that Crowder forcefully made Candy remember things she would have much rather forgotten. Crowder was pretty tough on Candy all throughout the trial. He decided, and he thought it was in her best interest, if he remained as, emotionally distant from her as possible. He wanted to go after her hard, and he did not want to have, any bias or anything like that that would, prevent him from just really going at her in the courtroom. And so, after 6 sessions in total, 3 under hypnosis and 3 not, Candy's version of events that day emerged. So I am now going to go into Candy's version of events, all right? And again, it is important to note, this is what Candy says happened that day. We obviously don't know what really happened because Betty's not here to tell us. This is what Candy, under hypnosis and with those sessions with her lawyers, this is the story that Candy would tell, all right? So, that day, June 13th, 1980, Candy did get to Betty's house at around 10 a.m., and the two did chat, and Candy did ask about Alyssa, and she really did visit the Gore's new puppy. Candy said she was actually almost done with the visit when all of a sudden, Betty's gaze went, quote, unfocused. And Betty, just without any preamble, just straight up asked Candy if she was having an affair with her husband, Alan. Candy did admit that, yes, they had an affair, but she assured Betty it was all over. It's okay, girl, so yeah, I screwed your husband, but it's okay, I'm not screwing him anymore. I'm sure she didn't say it like that, but can you imagine? Oh, no, yeah, I totally had an affair with your husband, but it's okay, we're not having an affair anymore. Okay. Candy said that Betty then excused herself, and when she came back, she was holding the 3-foot wood-handled axe. Now, Betty's grip on the axe was pretty clumsy, the blade was pointed down, and she was kind of holding it loosely. Now, Candy said at that point she wasn't, worried about, being attacked with the axe or anything. She was more worried about, what Betty was going to say to her. That's really what she was worried about. See, this is what happens when you have an affair, Candy. People get hurt and they get upset. So, they're sitting at the kitchen table at this point. Betty just puts the axe up against a wall, and she tells Candy that she never wants to see her again and that she can't see Alan again. Candy said that she didn't want Alan, that the affair had been over for quite some time, and that, given everything, she would just bring Alyssa home after the Bible study school and, just be done with it. But for some reason, Betty was like, no, you can go ahead and take Alyssa to the movie and have her stay the night, I don't know why, but maybe because she knew, Alyssa really liked Jenny, and she didn't want to spoil, a good time for her daughter. Maybe that was why. But yeah, she told Candy, no, you can go ahead and take Alyssa and spend the night and whatnot. And that's when Betty walked down the hall to get a towel, and she told Candy to go to the utility room to get Alyssa's swimsuit, which Candy promptly did. She was ready to get the F out of there. She was extremely uncomfortable. Yeah, see, yeah, it's almost as if sleeping with someone else's spouse wasn't the best idea, now was it? So yeah, Candy's in the utility room, and she is ready to GTFO, alright? She's very uncomfortable. And Candy says that she's getting Alyssa's swimsuit, and she's, turning around to put it in her bag, and Betty is all of a sudden in the doorway. Betty thrust a handful of peppermints into Candy's hand, again, telling her about Alyssa's reward system. Candy is now fumbling with, the swimsuit and, getting her glasses out and the peppermints, trying to, stuff it in her tote bag. And after a beat, Candy, she sees the heartache on Betty's face. She looks up and she sees just the heartbreak. And this is when Candy actually starts to feel guilty. It's like, yeah, like now you feel guilty? Like, really? I mean, whatever. I guess she had to have it be right there in her face. But yeah, see how having an affair isn't a victimless crime? Like, yeah, you hurt people. And yeah, she saw the hurt that she had, put on Betty. So Candy, sees the heartache on Betty's face. And Candy is just so racked with guilt, all right? So racked with guilt. That's when she reaches out her arm to pat Betty's arm, and she says, quote, "Oh, Betty, I'm so sorry." Yeah. And it is at this moment that Betty's heartache and pain turns to rage. Yeah, I don't know about reaching out and like touching her on the arm and saying like, "I'm so sorry." Maybe just don't touch her. Like, I wouldn't want to be touched. But yeah, all of a sudden, Betty, she's no longer heartbroken. She's angry. And all of a sudden, she pushes Candy hard, violently back into the utility room. Right after she pushed Candy into the utility room, she then grabbed the axe, holds it diagonally from her with the blade pointed down, and shouted that Candy could not have Alan, all right? He was hers. Candy said that she didn't want Alan, and that's when Betty stepped closer with the axe. As Betty is reaching closer, Candy reaches out and puts her hands on the axe and, says, "Don't." And for a moment, the two kind of like freeze and look at each other. It's almost like in a cartoon or something where they both have their hands on this axe and they're both kind of looking at each other. And it's almost sort of like, is this really going to happen? Like, is this what's going to happen? It's kind of like one of those moments. And then all of a sudden, Betty starts wiggling the axe, trying to gain full control of it. Oh, man, I just cannot talk. Gain full control over it and throw Candy off. The two start struggling with the axe. Betty is still blocking the exitway out of the utility room. Betty allegedly told Candy, quote, "I've got to kill you." And getting a brief upper hand in the struggle, Betty does manage to ding Candy in the head with the flat side of the blade. And that's where that injury to Candy's head came from. Candy stumbled back, holding her head, and Betty advances further still with the axe held. Only this time, now, she has the axe held over her head as if she's gonna strike. Candy screamed and, put her hands up in like a defensive position and stumbled sideways into the cupboard, knocking like toys and knickknacks everywhere. Betty swung down, it missed, and the axe bounced off the linoleum and did manage to get a little bit of Candy's pinky toe, and that's how she got the injury there. And it is after receiving this injury on her toe that Candy grabs the axe by the blade, because that's what she could reach, and that now she says that she was angry. She was no longer afraid for her life. She was angry. Seeing Candy trying to take control of the axe via the blade, Betty starts wiggling the axe back and forth. And this struggle is brutal. These two women aren't just struggling over the axe. Like, at the same time that they're struggling for control of the axe, Betty via the handle, Candy via the blade, Betty is, like, striking and kicking Candy all over her legs and thighs wherever she can reach her. That's where the bruises came from. Candy is trying to bite down on Betty's knuckles, trying to get her to let go. Like, this is like a brutal fight going on. Now, when Candy did bite down on Betty's knuckle, she did manage to get a brief upper hand, and she managed to get some leverage, and she pushed the axe against Betty, and this caused Betty to fall backward violently against the freezer. And she smacked her head real good on the freezer as she went down. Now, as Betty is struggling to get up, all right, she's struggling to get up, her body is facing away from Candy at this point, okay? She's trying to get back up after dinging her head real good on the freezer. Body facing away from Candy. That is when Candy, who now has the axe, holds it above her head and brings it down. She hits the back of Betty's head with a sickening pop. and blood just begins to come pouring out of Betty's head. And Betty is still struggling to get up at this point, so she's bleeding profusely from this wound on her head while still struggling to get up. Terrified by the amount of blood and thinking that she had just killed Betty, Candy is looking to get out of there. She dropped the axe and headed towards the exit of the utility room. And she just got her hand on the doorknob to turn the door when all of a sudden, Betty slams her from behind. No, she was not dead. So Betty had not been killed by that blow, but she was bleeding pretty bad. But she had enough strength to get up again, grab the axe, and now slam against Candy from behind. Candy said at that point she begged for her life, at which Betty responded, quote, "I can't." And that's when the two start struggling for control of the axe yet again. They shoved and punched each other, trying to get a hold of the axe. Candy was trying to open the doorknob to the garage, because remember the utility room separated the kitchen from the garage. So Betty has the doorway to the kitchen blocked. So, Candy was just trying to get out of there at that point. And so she, tried to reach for the door that would open to the garage. But, every time one of them would get an upper hand on the other would take it away. And it was just a brutal struggle going on with each, punching and kicking the other. Finally, when Candy managed to grab her hand and reach the doorknob to the garage and turned, it wouldn't turn. That's when she becomes scared and helpless again. She turns around and just starts crying and begging Betty for her life. She just begs Betty, please let me go. I don't want Alan. I'm sorry. Just anything that, that would get Betty to let her leave. Betty just looked at her holding the axe, now dripped with blood, by the way. She was, becoming weak from blood loss. And that's when Betty, allegedly holding the axe still, puts a finger to her lips and goes, shh, to Candy. Now, at this point, this is where Candy supposedly snaps. Okay? Snaps. So apparently, when Betty had gone, shh, this had caused Candy to snap. It caused her to recall a long repressed memory. And allegedly, this suppressed memory is one that Dr. Faison had uncovered while Candy was under hypnosis, all right? So, apparently, it goes all the way back to when Candy was 4 years old, all right? So, she's living in France. She's 4 years old. And she has a foot race with a neighborhood boy named Johnny. They were going to have a foot race, and the winner was going to be able to pump water from this, well into, this large glass jar. Now, Candy lost the race, and as, 4-year-olds are prone to do, she threw a temper tantrum. And she actually grabbed the large glass jar and slammed it down on the ground. A piece of glass had ricocheted off the ground and struck her right between the eyes, and she immediately started gushing blood. And by the time they had rushed 4-year-old Candy to the ER, she was screaming and crying and in so much pain, the nurses had to physically hold her down. Now, her mother, being the ever conservative, always worrying what others thought, that is when she tells Candy to shh, puts her finger to Candy's lips and says shh, because what would the people in the waiting room think? Now, under hypnosis, Candy has said, in that moment, she had wanted to scream. She was so angry and scared in that one moment, but she couldn't. And when Betty shushed Candy, that had triggered that same response that Candy had felt when she was 4 years old all those years ago. And it is at this time, after Betty does the shh, that Candy decides to wrestle for control of the axe one last time. Candy grabbed the metal blade and started wrestling for control. Betty, seeing this, is wrestling control via the handle, which is now streaked with blood, so it's very slippery. And because the handle's all slippery from all the blood and the wrestling for control, Betty loses her balance and falls backward violently yet again. And Betty was still struggling to get up when Candy, who now has full control of the axe, once again brings it over her head and brings it down. Now, Candy swung the axe down just as Betty, who is like blinded and disoriented from blood loss and whatnot, Betty was just getting up and she was going to charge at Candy, like kind of like football tackle style. And so Betty gets up to charge at Candy just as Candy brings the axe down, and Betty runs headlong into the axe, redoubling its force. It came down directly across the top of her forehead, penetrating the skull with a sickening crack. Candy said that it sounded like a coconut being sliced open with a machete. Betty's arms were flung out, and Candy brought the axe down yet again. This time, striking Betty in the forehead and penetrating the skull. Betty was grabbing her head and moaning at this point. She grabbed her head, and fistfuls of hair were coming out now. And as Candy struck yet again, she missed Betty's head, but struck her arm. And immediately it went limp. This was the arm that had been nearly severed, and the bone was also sticking out. And Betty's arm completely just dropped to her side. Candy struck Betty again and again, over and over, hitting her in the head multiple times, damaging her skull to where, her brain leaked out. And all this time, Betty's body still wasn't going down. She was still, in the action of getting up. And according to Candy, this just, fueled her rage, which made her, hit the axe down over and over, even more, because she was trying to get Betty to, go down and stay down. She ended up striking Betty 41 times with the axe, and Betty had even tried to block some of the blows with her own flesh, her body flailing and twitching with, each swing that, Candy dealt to her. And even after Betty's body finally went down and she was sprawling on the floor staring at Candy, Candy swung the axe again and again at her face, pummeling and damaging the whole right side of her face. Candy screamed and continued swinging and swinging the axe over and over and over. Candy literally only stopped swinging the axe due to pure exhaustion. She literally could not lift the axe to swing again. Dr. Faison testified that during these blows, Candy wasn't even present, okay? It was that pure rage, that pure emotional rage that she had repressed and held onto since she was 4 years old. Afterwards, still disoriented and sort of operating on autopilot, Candy left the utility room and went down the hall and went to the bathroom. She was starting to feel sick, so she turned on the shower and let the water, wash over her, and she's feeling a little bit better. She turned it off, though, because she didn't want to get totally soaked. She dried off her arms with a towel, straightened her hair, and tried to dry off, and then she grabbed towels to try and clean up the mess. She grabs some towels and starts attempting to clean up the mess in the utility room. She's trying to clean up the mess. That's when she put her hand on the freezer for support, and that's where that bloody fingerprint came from. But she started realizing that there was just too much blood, and she wasn't going to be able to clean it up. Candy suddenly remembered everything that she had to do that day. It was starting to come back to her, and she looked down at her watch, but it was broken, and it had broken at 10:20 a.m., and it is said that it broke when she entered the shower and the water hit it. So, not really looking at Betty's body and trying to ignore the dogs yapping at the door, she gathers her things and then leaves the house. She keeps telling herself things like, okay, one thing at a time, you have to act normal, just stay calm. Now, it is important to note that, again, this is Candy's recollection of events. We don't have Betty's recollection of events, and we don't have any other story to tell just Candy's. So very important to note that that was Candy's version of events. No one knows for sure what happened exactly, you know? There was a 5-year-old girl who lived down the street from the Gores. She was given the moniker Tina in court documents. And she witnessed Candy exiting Betty's house that day. So she was already on her way to the Gore house. She wanted to see if Alyssa was home to play. And she saw Candy exiting the Gore residence, and she looked straight ahead and was in a hurry, and she didn't even make eye contact with Tina, who was on the side of the road, walking to the house, and Candy left in her car. Little Tina went up on the porch, knocked on the door. She could hear Bethany crying, but no one came to the door, and so she left, and she didn't notice the little microscopic drops of blood that had been on the front porch. So yeah, that was Candy's story that she told in court. Now, all through the trial, Candy was relatively quiet and subdued, She didn't really, her face didn't really betray a lot of emotion or anything. She wanted to have a very neutral expression on her face. As we know, Candy doesn't want to show weakness, And when the coroner had testified to Betty's wounds and went into really graphic detail and also showed pictures, it is said that is the only time that Candy put her head down and she didn't look up again until that whole section had passed. Now, when Candy took the stand, she was very soft-spoken and meek. And Crowder was worried that Candy was going to come off cold, even rehearsed to the jury. So he decided to get a little rough in his questioning of her. In an effort to evoke emotion, Crowder went over to the evidence table, and with his back to Candy, he grabbed the axe. And then he turned around and brandished it at her and was like, you did it, didn't you? You and Alan put her in this position, didn't you? Didn't you? He was trying to get her to show some sort of emotion, because she was so reserved and quiet. He was really scared, how that was going to play to the jury, And this is the first time that Candy starts to show emotion. Candy begged Crowder to take the weapon away and not make her look at it. And finally, Crowder hushed and pushed until finally, Candy couldn't take it anymore. She finally just wailed and screamed. And her scream was loud, all right? Loud. It was so loud that Pat, who was sitting in a witness room 2 rooms over, he even heard it. Yeah, that's how much emotion that Crowder was able to evoke from her. Now it's time for his cross-examination. O'Connell was, of course, trying to poke holes in Candy's testimony and story. He also really zeroed in on the affair that she had with Alan, of course, because he's trying to attack her character, right? So he really focused in on that. And he actually asked Candy on stand if Alan was the last affair that she had, which, of course, as we know, it wasn't. And begrudgingly, he got Candy to not only admit to the second affair, but give Richard's name on the public record. Yeah. And of course, after this, Candy had to tell Pat about the second affair, and he didn't take news of this affair nearly as well. He was devastated. This was one of the only times that O'Connell had, gotten to Candy, and she hated him. The other time that O'Connell had gotten to Candy is when he focused in on the fact that baby Bethany had been left alone all day, and he really attacked the fact that Candy considered herself a mother, a church-going, loving woman, and yet she had not only brutally murdered Betty, but she had left her baby alone all day. And he really zeroed in on this fact. And those were the 2 times that O'Connell really got to Candy on the stand. Crowder brought in other psychiatrists to bolster the claim that they were going with. One psychiatrist that he called to the stand was Dr. Maurice Green. And he testified about dissociative reaction. What's dissociative reaction? This is where a person induces amnesia on themselves. The brain has decided not to remember these specific memories in order to protect itself. So that's what Dr. Green was testifying about. He testified that after Candy saw him for a couple of sessions, she actually expressed anger towards Betty. Yeah, anger towards Betty. That Betty had started this whole awful chain of events, and that she had just left everything alone, everything would be fine. And this, like, rage and hatred towards Betty erupted during the fight. Like, can you imagine? I'm sorry, you're the one who's angry here? Excuse me? Nah, bish, nah. No, I don't think so. You don't get to be angry. Like, you're angry that she's upset that you slept with her husband? Like, no, I don't understand how that works, but okay. Now, in cross-examination, Dr. Green did have to admit that someone who has dissociative reaction, it's not a sign of a mental illness, all right? And he also said that Candy did know what she was doing, except when she was striking the blows with the axe. Dr. Green said, quote, "She just kind of went berserk momentarily." Now, after this testimony, that's when Judge Ryan actually halted the trial altogether and ordered Candy to undergo a psychological evaluation to determine her sanity and competency. And she was found to be sane and competent, and so the trial resumed. Now, after Dr. Green, that's when Crowder called Dr. Faison to the stand, and he was a much better witness. So, whereas Dr. Green kind of came off as, like, nervous and sweaty, Dr. Faison was just very personable and charismatic. He said that Candy's dissociative reaction was not a result of the events of that Friday the 13th. He said after the 20 hours he had spent with her, he had determined that her dissociative reaction was a result of, like, a lifetime of repressing this, like, rage and anger that she had, going all the way back to when she was 4 years old in that ER. And when her mother told her, shh. When the struggle with Betty started, according to Dr. Faison, it was self-defense. But when Betty went, shh, that long suppressed, like, rage and anger from Candy just came out. That rage and anger that she had held on to for, like, 26 years, it just boiled over. It just boiled over and erupted. Dr. Faison testified that Candy was so ashamed that she was capable of that level of anger and rage that her mind literally would not let her remember it. You know, she was that ashamed. And this explains why she never went to authorities or confessed or anything. Dr. Faison also testified that Candy did not consciously intend to take Betty Gore's life. And also said that Dr. Faison held up beautifully under cross-examination. Although interesting to note that Crowder was not at all a fan of the shh theory. He did not like that at all. And as you can guess, the press had a field day with it. Now, after the defense rested and everyone's arguments were made, it was now up to the jury to decide Candy's fate. Now, when O'Connell told Alan that he was actually worried after Candy's testimony because of how well she had done, it is said Alan responded that, quote, "Whatever happens, it's for the best." Yeah, real quick. Let's talk about Alan Gore. Let's talk about this piece of shit for a second. So, what was Alan Gore? What was he doing this whole time? Oh, he was just sleeping with another family friend. This woman was the name of Elaine Williams, and she was getting a divorce. Now, Betty had only been dead for 2 months before Alan decided to take up a relationship with Elaine and, start sleeping with her. Yeah, can you believe that? Now, look, I get people grieve in different ways, but look, even at the trial, when he testified, Alan came across to everyone, Crowder, O'Connell, the judge, the jurors, the press, he came off to everyone as just, like, detached and cold and unemotional. It's like he didn't care that this was his wife's murder trial, you know? He just seemed completely disinterested. And in fact, when he was in the witness room for a couple days, it is said that he was just reading a book the whole time, not even bothering to feign interest in what was going on. I know. Can you believe that? Like, what? Bob Pomeroy, Betty's father, he had attended the funeral, and he was surprised and shocked at how cold and uninterested his son-in-law seemed. When he was testifying about the affair with Candy, he was just very nonchalant and relaxed about it. It's like he had no shame. He did testify, though, that Candy had, in fact, never seen the axe that was stored in the garage area. So yeah, that was what Alan Gore was throughout the trial. I couldn't believe that. And I've got some thoughts that I will talk about Alan Gore later. Now, so it was now in the hands of the jury, and the jury took less than 4 hours to find Candy Montgomery not guilty. Not guilty. Yeah. Can you believe not guilty? Now, surprise, surprise, this verdict was not popular with the public at all. At all, all right? The press quoted several people who were lined up outside the courtroom, and everyone was appalled. And a lot of the quotes, most of them were women, had phrases such as, disgusted, appalled, disillusioned. I was watching some news reports of people's reaction, and they were outraged. Like one woman was just like, she should have been charged with something like manslaughter or something. This is ridiculous. Headlines were also not very generous to the outcome of this trial. One headline was like, "Woman hacked 41 times in self-defense," jury says. So yeah, it was stuff like that. And now, almost immediately after the trial, Candy, of course, started receiving hate mail. She was the most hated woman in Texas at this point, all right? The most hated woman. She received all kinds of letters. Like, one letter had "shh" written all over it. And yeah, it was just bad. Crowder and Udasin were also getting hate mail at their law offices. And I just thought this was just like an interesting, I just wanted to tell this part, because it just really shows how much vitriol and hatred, there was towards Candy. So there was this poem that was sent to Crowder's offices, and it was called "Candy is Bad for Your Health." And so I'm going to look down for a little bit, because it's a couple of lines. And again, I just can't believe that someone actually took the time to write this and send it off to someone. So it's called "Candy is Bad for Your Health." So it said, "Candy Montgomery was a whore. She screwed around with Alan Gore. When Betty Gore brought it up, Candy used an axe to cut her up. And Calden County, murder's okay if you go to church and pray. And don't worry, adultery's cool if you teach Sunday school." And that poem actually was much longer, but yeah, I saw a little portion of it. I was like, wow. It was not good. And within the verdict was read 3 days before Halloween, so October 27th, 1980. And yeah, because the verdict was read so close to Halloween, there were actually Candy Montgomery Halloween costumes, which, by the way, why, out of all the costumes, don't dress up as any type of true crime perpetrator or victim. What are you doing? What are you doing? There's not enough fictional murderers for you to dress up as. But yeah, these costumes had cardboard axes. Some of them had signs on their back that said "Whisper to me at your own risk." It was pretty bad. The hate towards Candy was so bad that 8 days after the trial, the Montgomerys up and left the state of Texas for good. There's no way that they could stay where they had been, They actually relocated to Georgia, and surprise, surprise, after all of that, Candy and Pat ended up getting divorced. It is said that today, Candy goes by her maiden name, Candace Wheeler, and she works with her daughter Jenny as a mental health therapist. Yeah, Candy went and became a mental health therapist, specifically specializing in teens with depression and mental health problems. And she supposedly works with her daughter Jenny in their clinic in Dawson, Georgia. Now, it seems even today, more than 40 years after everything, Candy still struggles with her past. Apparently, her and her daughter's practice have been review bombed across several sites for a number of years. There was one review as recent as 2019 that called Candy a, quote, "horrible, evil woman." Now, Jenny has come out and tried to say several times that her mother does not work at her clinic there in Georgia, but apparently the clinic's newsletter says the opposite. So I don't know. It's just girl, you're super hated. Maybe try to actually change your name, not just go to your maiden name, Candace Wheeler, I don't know, if that was me, I would definitely be changing my whole name, first and last name, And as of 2010, that was the latest up-to-date information I could find about Pat Montgomery. As of 2010, he actually goes by James Montgomery. And in 2010, he was employed at EMS Technologies Defense and Space Division in Norcross, Georgia. Do not know what he is up to today. I don't know if he's retired or what, but that was Pat. Alan Gore, he remarried. He married Elaine between the death of Betty and Candy's trial. Let's remember, Betty's death was June 13th. Candy's trial ended October 27th. Between June and October, Alan got married to Elaine. Yeah. And big shocker, that didn't last, and they got divorced. Shocker, right? Now, Alyssa and Bethany were actually raised by Bob and Bertha Pomeroy, Betty's parents. It is said that Alan, I don't know, I read some weird reports. So I read one that said Alan lost custody to Betty's parents. Makes me wonder how hard he fought, if that was the case. I'm not sure, but either way, Alan grew up, his daughters grew up estranged from him, right? Yeah, what a POS. What a POS. How dare you allow yourself to become estranged from your two daughters who lost their mother at a very young age, I'm sorry, I personally think Alan Gore is the biggest POS in this whole case. I've got thoughts on Candy, which I'll get to in a moment, but I think Alan Gore is a gigantic POS. The nerve of him. And I guess credit to him, because in the book that I read for this case, Evidence of Love, they got interviews with all the major players, Candy, Pat, Alan, and their friends. And, he gave interviews, and I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I don't think he came off in a very good light at all in that book. I think he comes off as a callous a-hole. Yeah. Now, it is said that he may have reestablished a relationship with Alyssa and Bethany, but apparently that was just based on the fact that he was Facebook friends with them a couple of years ago. I don't know. But yeah, he is now married to his third wife, Linda McClellan Gore. Or, excuse me, Lindy McClellan Gore, and he lives in Eastport, Maine. Now, Alyssa Gore, she now goes by Lisa Harder, and she's now married with 2 sons, and she lives in Newton, Kansas. Bethany Gore, she married in 2012, and she now goes by Mrs. Chad Mickey, and she lives with her husband in Las Vegas, Nevada. And in a kind of sad, bizarre, tragic twist, Don Crowder, Candy's defense attorney, he actually committed suicide on November 10th, 1998. He locked himself inside his weight room, told his wife through the door that he had, quote, too much pressure, and shot himself in the head. He was 56 years old, and he'd actually run for governor of Texas in 1986, because Candy's case kind of gave him some notoriety. I almost couldn't say that word for a second. Yeah, he kind of gained some fame after that, and so he tried to capitalize that on that by running for governor. In 1984, this case was made into the book The Evidence of Love, a true story of passion and death in the suburbs. And that's where a bulk majority of information for this case came. It's written by Dallas journalist John Bloom and Jim Atkinson. And yeah, like I said, they had interviews with Candy, Pat, Allen, Bob Pomeroy, all the major players. And the book actually became a source material for a made-for-TV movie about this case in 1990. And actress Barbara Hershey actually played Candy, and she actually won an Emmy and a Golden Globe for her portrayal, and it was called Murder in a Small Town. And this year, HBO Max is currently filming a Candy Montgomery case of their own, again, based on this book, Evidence of Love, and my girl, Elizabeth Olsen, the Scarlet Witch herself, is playing Candy. So I don't want to say, I'm excited for this, because it is sad that it's based on, a real life true crime series, so, I don't know how to feel about things that are adapted from true crime stories. Let me know, what do you think about those? I'm just more excited to see Elizabeth Olsen in another role. I really like her. I really enjoy her acting, so I'm excited to see her in a different role. So, real quick, because I was super interested, and I had always grown up learning that, hypnosis isn't, what it's portrayed in the movie and TV shows, And so I just did a super quick Google search, because I was already in the rabbit hole enough on this case. So I just did a super quick Google search. And on John Hopkins University's website, they say this about hypnosis. So I'm going to look down for a little bit, so bear with me. So they said, quote, using hypnosis to extract hidden or vague memories may not be reliable. Although there is a widespread belief that hypnosis produces accurate memories, researchers found that hypnosis does not work well as a memory recovery method. In addition, people who have been hypnotized tend to feel more confident that their memories are accurate, contributing to the persistence of fake and false memories. Yeah. And there was a 2001 study done by Ohio State University, and they concluded, quote, hypnosis doesn't help people recall events more accurately, but it does tend to make people more confident of their inaccurate memories. So I thought that was just a little interesting. Now, personally, I think Candy definitely should have served some time. I think that's why she still gets a lot of hate all these many years later, because a lot of people feel that she got away with murder, right? Now, I'm not saying like lock her up for life. I'm not even saying lock her up in like a prison with like hardcore criminals. Like lock her up in like some sort of psychiatric unit for some time, like some time. I don't know, like 10, 15 years? I don't know. I think that's why, like, I didn't mind Susan B. Ancardi being released, because she had served her time, gotten help, and had proven to the parole board that she was cool, Whereas Candy just got to, go off living her life. And yeah, I don't know. I'm super curious to know what you think. Do you think Candy Montgomery should have been found guilty? Do you agree with the verdict? If you did think she should have been found guilty, what do you think she should have been found guilty of? Like second-degree murder, manslaughter? How much time would you want her to serve? I'm super, super curious to know what you guys think. I would love to hear your thoughts about this case, because I can't believe she was found not guilty. I definitely believe that if Candy Montgomery was tried today in 2022, I really don't think her defense would have worked. I really don't. I think she would have been found guilty of something. But yeah, that was the long case of Candy Montgomery, the axe murderer. And thank you so much for making it this far and sticking with me. I know, probably didn't have to make this 2 parts, but again, there was just so many juicy details in this case that I just had to go over it. And yeah, as a reminder, next week will be my last video for the month of March. So I know you're saying like, wait a minute, there's another Tuesday after that. I have decided that months that have 5 Tuesdays in them, I'm going to take the 5th Tuesday off just to, recharge, get ahead on like some research and filming and whatnot, So next week will be my last March video, and then I will be right back here in April. And yeah, I hope you have a fun, safe, happy St. Patrick's Day. If you go out and drink, just come on, don't be an idiot. Don't drink and drive. Don't be stupid. All right. I know you're not stupid, so I shouldn't have to worry, right? Yeah, until next week, I hope you stay safe and be happy out there. Remember, don't be a dick. Just be a decent person when you go out in public. And I will see you next Tuesday for another crime dive. Bye-bye.